Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. And we are continuing our discussion this month on energy. And today we're going to focus on team energy, how to read it, how to regenerate it, and why that's important. So, in order to help you recognize when team energy is low or maybe worse, misaligned, right? It's important for you to understand the deeper causes and the results that come from that, right? So some deeper causes may be a lack of psychological safety and low morale becomes a result of that. And we want to help you take some intentional steps to restore the collective momentum and get that engagement going without resorting to, let's say, I don't know, maybe superficial solutions, right? And so it's important to understand what's going on, to recognize it so that you can address the actual cause and not just the symptoms. Is that the way that goes? You want to address the cause and not the symptoms.
Correct. Yeah.
Um, okay. So, some opening thoughts on this.
No, I think this is a great topic, especially now in the summertime because it is hot. My energy is low sometimes when it's really like this. But no, I think this is a great topic because a lot of people, and we talked about this before, they misunderstand what we mean by energy. It's not some woo-woo thing. It can be, but we're really talking about mental energy and physical energy and spiritual energy. And we're going to tackle all that stuff because it all wraps into each other. It's all part of the whole thing, the whole.
Right. And we've addressed sort of the energy of leaders over the last couple of episodes. So if you did not see that, I would commend you to go back and review those episodes. And today we're going to talk about the energy of the team, right? And so we talked about how your energy impacts the energy of your team and what you could do about that, but the energy of your team can impact you just as well, and different members of the team's energy impacts each other. So none of this is in a vacuum, right? Nothing is in a vacuum. Everything is interconnected, interdependent, and paying attention to this is going to be really important. So and we're not just talking about enthusiasm, right?
No.
That's important, but it's not just about enthusiasm. Whether or not your team has energy, and as Robert mentioned, right, not just physical energy or emotional energy, but spiritual energy. And we've talked about that spiritual energy being a reflection of purpose, right? Being tied into something bigger and purpose for the individuals on the team and then the team as a whole. So each person on the team is there and doing the work that they do, doing their role for a particular reason, right? They have their purpose and their reason for it. And then the team itself as a collective unit or entity. And this is one of the things that I remind my clients and trainees is that if you've got a team of five, you actually have six entities that you're working with, right? Because each person is their own entity. They have their own personality, work styles, communication styles, the way they interact with each other. But your team is an entity in
Correct.
and of itself. And so you have to remember that. And it's not, you don't get to treat everybody on the team the same because it's a team,
Right.
right? And so we're going to dig into that a little bit. So we want to talk about, and this is something we talk about frequently, right? Trust, right? So the whether or not your team feels safe, psychologically safe, is a reflection of trust. It's a reflection of the clarity of their understanding of their role, the tasks that they're responsible for, and what's expected of them. And that comes by way of communication, and it impacts the culture. So we want to tackle some of those things. And before we get into sort of the three areas that we're going to talk about, sure, you're asking, why does this matter? Right? What is the point of all of this? And the point is that team energy affects productivity, it affects retention, it affects creativity, and as mentioned, psychological safety. And when people are depleted, when they are unsure or unacknowledged, what happens is they don't tend to speak up, they check out, right? And that's where you get disengagement. So if you've got disengagement and you're like, well, why are my employees disengaged? Why is the team disengaged? Right? This is hopefully going to give you some insight, some potential insight. There could be other reasons, but it could be related to energy and something that hasn't been addressed. And when you don't address low energy, then your culture silently erodes. And it reminds me of, as I was thinking about this, it's some different periods of time in my life in my work life, when I have been disengaged, and how I showed up at work, right? And I can very well look back, and it's sort of hindsight 2020 now, and say, yeah, it was very low energy. And some of that I took from others, and some of that I brought as a result of things that were happening or the way that I felt about things. And so it feeds off itself, and it reinforces, the not feeling safe creates low energy that comes from a source where you don't feel safe, right? So you've got this cycle that is going, and the bottom line is you've got to sort of interrupt that cycle so that you can move forward.
Well, yeah, and a lot of times I think that when you were talking, something came to my mind. A lot of times, in my experience, many of the leaders that I worked with didn't realize how they were impacting or contributing to the energy in the department. Whether or not they came in, they had a lot of negative energy around them because they were in a bad mood. So emotionally, that did not lend itself to us being energized or emotionally in a good place, because emotions are contagious. We know this.
Yeah.
Or they would confuse us with a lot of different priorities. Well, everything was the same priority, right? Everything was top priority. So we didn't know what to focus on. And that eroded our mental energy. We didn't have a sense of clarity. And so that created a lot of chaos. And some leaders, they really don't understand how they are contributing to the energetic environment of their group.
For sure. And again, I'm thinking about different, environments that I've been in. And this is an important thing to keep in mind, is that energy is information, right? You're paying attention to energy as information. It's feedback, right? And so if you pay attention to the signals, then an observation, instead of approaching it in sort of a what's wrong way, I've got some ideas that could be a more productive way to get at what's going on. And sometimes when the question that is posed is, what's wrong or what's wrong with you. And I could think of some times being in staff meetings and the person in charge facilitating the meeting, would put something out there and gets no response, right? The people in the meeting are sitting on their hands, they're staring at the walls, they are playing with their devices under the table or whatever, right? That's feedback. That's information that tells you something. And so it is your responsibility to get to the heart of what that information, what that feedback is telling you. And ignoring the signals can lead to a number of different things, right? It could lead to burnout if people on your team are feeling overwhelmed, or they are feeling misaligned, or it's telling you, maybe it leads to turnover, certainly the disengagement, or you could get something like groupthink. And I was thinking specifically of some times where, and this probably wasn't even really groupthink. This was probably people just being resolved to wanting to get to move through and just sort of capitulating, right? And just saying, yes, whatever you say, in order to sort of get out of an uncomfortable situation. And so they're in a, like, having post-traumatic stress, just sort of thinking about it, right? It was like particularly being in some executive team meetings, and you know the directors of this organization just sort of going along to get along, to keep, just to sort of move through what was not a good situation. And so again, maybe that isn't, not so much groupthink, but it sort of lends itself to that situation. So you could get groupthink, or you could just get people going along, just so that they can move on and get out of it. And so what you want to do is create opportunities and an environment where listening is valued. And that allows for there to be some space that's created to connect or reconnect, or to restore, or to begin to restore some of the things that are needed, like trust, right? Alignment, getting on the same page, making sure people are clear about what it is that they are there for and what it is you want to do. And so something that you could do, whether it's in a meeting, a one-on-one meeting, or a meeting with many people, is to have a check-in at the beginning. And I am a part of a couple of organizations that I don't necessarily facilitate the gatherings, but this happens, and I see it as something that I find to be pretty effective. And it'll be either on a scale, or asking simply, what's a word that describes how you're feeling right now, right? Or on a scale of 1 to 5, what are you feeling right now, so that you can get some, so that you can know right up front what you're working with, rather than being reactive. You can be more proactive in dealing with people right where they are, because that becomes an important part of this, is that we have to meet people where they are. And this is not about trying to make people feel something different than they feel, but to acknowledge where they are, and then see what's needed to shift the energy in those situations.
I agree. I would even go so far as to asking directly, how's your energy right now, or what level of energy do you have for this topic right now, and scale it, right? Because I love the scaling questions, because it gives you a real accurate gauge as to how people feel. And I think that what a couple of things happen. When you were talking, you were saying you were having some post-traumatic stress. I was having some post-traumatic stress. Remembering being in a meeting with this one executive who would frequently invite me to his meetings, and all he wanted to do was talk at people. It wasn't. It wasn't. So the energy in the room was very low. People didn't want to go in the first place because they knew they weren't there to give any ideas. If they were to say anything, it was to assent. They had to agree, because if they disagreed, it caused problems for them personally. This person was notorious for going after people who disagreed, even if it was done in the most polite or professional way. So the meetings were just a place to kind of pontificate and to, and I think this was, I don't want to start talking about generational things here, but this was an old school manager who really believed in the power of meetings, right? And it was just to have the meeting to talk about what was going on in his mind, when it could have been an email, certainly, and it wasn't a place where ideas were given. So also, we talked about psychological safety, because this person had a habit of castigating people that disagreed. Whenever they wanted ideas, people wouldn't give them because they didn't feel safe. So when there were situations that really required people to give information, because it really hinged on having a variety of ideas or solutions, very few people would speak up, because it was very difficult to build that psychological safety was not built. So a couple of things with that: you really have to have that psychologically safe space for people to do that, and you really need to know the purpose of your meeting. It shouldn't be just to. I'm using meetings as an example here, to pontificate and talk about your brilliance. If you're going to have that meeting needs to have a purpose. People need to be bought into that, so they will have energy and check in. See how they check in the beginning, check in the middle, and then get some feedback at the end as to how things went, so you can have that real time feedback around their energy toward the topic or project or whatever that you're engaged in.
So I totally agree with you, and it made me think about um, a story of someone who, every time they came into the room, right, this concept of people either shrinking back or leaning in, right? And so I think ultimately the most important thing is just to see energy as data. Look around the room. Robert had some suggestions for questions. I love that idea of just straight up asking the question, right? Or you can phrase it however you want that makes sense for you and your communication style and that of your team members. Whether it's straight out just asking the question, what's the energy in the room? Maybe it's a range, maybe it's a color. Is it red, yellow, or green? Give a word to describe how you're feeling right now. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, whatever it is. And then take that information, take that data, right, and then respond accordingly. And the most important thing is just to remember it's information, but you have to do something with information. Right? You're not gathering it. You're not asking to be cordial, right? The point isn't just to ask. The point is to ask and use it in a way that leverages what it is you're there for. And going back to Robert's point, you should not be meeting without a purpose, right? And so the whole point is to gather that so that you can use it, so that you can help get to the purpose of your meeting.
Absolutely.
The next thing is about regenerating energy, right? And that starts with psychological safety. And people can't contribute their best when they're busy protecting themselves, right? And the way to not have them protecting themselves is to have an environment where they are free, safe to be themselves. And you think of safety as the soil of your environment, right? And nothing grows without it. Nothing grows without soil, nothing grows without safety. You're not going to get the best from your employees because they are using their energy, right? They're using their energy for other things. So if you want them to use it for creativity, innovation, productivity, that energy needs to be available for that, which means it can't be used for other things. And if they are using it, ducking and dodging, right, being disrespected or unacknowledged, etc., then it's not going to be available for the things that you want it to be there for. So team members that feel psychologically safe, or rather unsafe, they hold back. They hold back their ideas, they hold back their questions, and they'll hold back the truth, right? And what you end up getting then is stagnation, right? You're not getting movement. Energy is meant to move. It's not meant to be hoarded and stuck in one place. It's meant to transfer from one entity to another or from one form to another. And if the people are not feeling safe, they're not going to do that. So make it okay for some strategies. Make it okay for people not to know, right? To ask questions, to be curious. And you could say things for you in terms of setting the example. I don't have all the answers, right? Depending on what the topic is. I don't have all the answers. What are your thoughts? And then give people the opportunity to weigh in, to contribute. When people feel like they are a part of what's going on, honestly feel like, right? This is not, again, not just asking for the sake of asking, but what are your thoughts? I I think I've shared this. I know I've shared this a number of times. I had worked for someone who said they didn't want yes people and would ask for input, and then you would give input and it would immediately get shot down. And what that shooting down did was shut people down. They stopped contributing. They stopped because it felt like a setup, right? I'm going to ask you a question, you're going to give me an answer, and then I'm going to shoot it down. And that left me feeling, well, why bother? Right? So that you don't want to create an environment that does that, and because then the energy gets stuck. People will show up to the meetings and they won't contribute.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that leaders can do. I mean, I think that it's almost comical sometimes when you see it, if you're an outside observer, because a lot of times people are clueless. They're clueless, and when they really want that input, they'll say, "Look, I want your ideas." But when you're in your example, when you gave an idea and it got shot down, so you have to create an environment where they feel comfortable doing that. Invite dissent, so that I love this, the rotating devil's advocate. When you have a new project you're doing, you have a team of people. Each time one person gets to shoot, pick holes, shoot holes into it. Not because they're being mean, because they're giving you, hey, what if this goes wrong? What if this happens? And it creates that environment where people feel, this is my job on this project, is to look at different things, to be the devil's advocate. But leaders also need to model vulnerability so that people will feel able to do that with them as well. And a lot of leaders have a hard time with that. They pretend that they know everything. Of course, no one knows everything. Or they have all the answers. No one has all the answers. You may have many of them, but no one has all the answers. So you want to be able to say those in those circumstances where you don't know the answer that you do not. So you want to model that, and also you want to allow for or have blameless reporting. You're not shooting the messenger when someone brings some bad news to you. I had a boss that anytime I brought any bad news to them, they would flip out. And again, I thought it was kind of comical, but because I was bringing the information to them for their benefit as well. I'm not just doing it to entertain myself, but their reaction to even the slightest bit of bad news was so outsized that I started to, look at it kind of comically, because if I didn't, I wouldn't tell them anything at all. So I just started to, kind of gamify it a little bit. Like, I think it's kind of funny that if you say this thing, which this person really needs to know, for the benefit of the department, they were kind of just blowing everything out of proportion. So you have to have create an environment where people feel that they can come to you and give you bad news, because that bad news is going to benefit you in most cases.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I love that concept of the rotating devil's advocate. What I see tending to happen is someone, maybe two someones, are the regular sort of devil's advocates, and then they become the people who are the problem children, right? And so the benefit of encouraging, right, whether intentionally or formally or informally, sort of that role to rotate, because no one person becomes the bad guy in the situation. And so it becomes, you need to publicly reward, really, people who ask questions, people who challenge in a respectful, in a positive way, right? Sort of challenge the status quo. People who will come with new ideas, and not just asking questions, to be a fly in the ointment, but to encourage them to ask the questions and then to try to solve the problems, right? Bring the ingenuity, the creativity, and the innovation to solve those problems and answer the questions that get brought up. But if you don't create that environment, if people don't feel safe to be honest, they're not going to feel safe to be engaged, right?
Yeah.
And so if they can't ask questions or challenge something, then eventually they're going to stop, right? And it may happen one person at a time, but eventually it's going to stop. And if you are the roadblock, right? Robert said you have to model what this looks like. You have to model vulnerability. You have to model that it's okay not to have the answer. That one of the benefits of being part of a team is that you're going to find the answers together, right? You're going to solve these problems together. Maybe initially it's verbally, but ultimately the work that you're doing is solving problems for your clients, your customers, your constituents, whoever you're serving. You're solving problems or helping them solve problems. And so it has to be okay to test the waters in order to get to the answers and the solutions that you're seeking for the people, the population that you're serving.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And then the last thing we want to touch on is that you want to have energized teams. And this is a basic of having a team in the first place, is that there needs to be some shared meaning and some shared momentum. If you guys are not moving towards the same thing, if you're not there, and people don't know what it is that they're contributing, and what they're contributing, whatever they're contributing, what it's contributing to, you're going to start to lose people. And so purpose, and we talked about this last week, Robert is the one that brought it up, right? Is that purpose is fuel, right? Purpose fuels people. And so you want to talk about that a little bit, Robert?
Meaning fuels morale, right? People will work harder when they're connecting what they're doing to something that matters to them. Whether it's their ability to, let's make it really simple, to buy a house, whether it's to further their goals, they want to be more educated in this particular field, and they see that doing projects in your department or with other departments is a way to do that. It helps fuel their morale. They will be more engaged. They'll have higher morale if they do that. It also helps them regenerate or bounce back after a setback, because they'll be able to see that setback as a stepping stone to get to where they are. And we've mentioned Thomas Edison, and not the best example, because Thomas Edison is also notorious for stealing other people's ideas, but he had a lot of great sayings. And one of the, when he was in front of a reporter and he was doing his experiments and he was failing over and over again, and the reporter pointed out, well, you failed. He goes, no, but I've learned how it won't work, right? And he probably was failing because he didn't have the person that actually did it with him. but still, be that what is right. Thomas Edison is still a great example of someone who was tenacious and who used setbacks as a way to get what he get to where he wanted to go, because he had a sense of purpose. He was laser focused. And when you have a sense of purpose, really nothing can stand in your way, as long as you're using that purpose as your North Star. It's really an amazing thing. Children are really good at that. We tend to lose sight of that as we get older, because we get beat down and worn down by life. But children are really good at that. At least my generation was. I don't know about children nowadays. I'm not disparaging anybody. Things are a little different now. But when you have that sense of purpose, and no one is telling you that you shouldn't, no one, adults, children are really good at staying laser focused for the most part. And we need to tap into that again. And it really helps. So when you have a team really looking at the collective values we talked about this, having collective values, if you can, even if it's one or two values that everybody agrees with, weave that into to the work, it can have an amazing impact.
Absolutely. So here's where I work with both clients and trainees on this, right? Your organization, theoretically, so I'm going to talk theoretically here, and hopefully this applies to you, has a strategic plan, right? Your organization has a strategic plan. Within that strategic plan, there is every function within your organization has one or two components of the strategic plan, the strategic goals that you are able to contribute to, right, or expected to contribute to. And so being clear about the strategic direction of your organization and how your department, your function fits into that becomes a first step in this, right? Because now I know that regardless of what role I play in the organization, that I am contributing to us going wherever it is we're going. And then, so there's sort of the organizational strategic plan, there is your department or your function strategic role within that, and then you can break that down even further, right? This is what you're doing with with the team as a whole, right? So that they understand how your team is contributing to this, and then individually how they are contributing to it. So that's the organization. And then it's important for you to understand what's important individually to the members of your team, right? So that you can help them tie their individual goals to the work goals and the organization's goals so that they can feel some sort of connection. And whether it is buying a house, right? So totally personal goals, has nothing to do with the organization, but the organization thriving and being around 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, bonuses, raises, etc., that's going to make it possible for you to, someone on your team to purchase the home or a boat or send their kids to college or whatever it is, right? You're tying these pieces together so that they are constantly thinking, my country, this little thing that I do, or this big thing that I do for this organization, this is the difference that it makes, and this is how this is going to impact me and make it possible for me to reach my individual goals as well, right? So you have to take the time to get to know the people on your team so that you can understand what matters to them, so that you can tie what matters to them to what matters to the organization. And it is that process that, as I work with, the people that I work with, that often gets lost because, and we talked about this when we talked about one-on-ones, earlier in the year. When you're trying to get work done, that this proactive piece of getting to know people and tying the pieces together it's really easy to get lost in the shuffle. But if you're noticing that there's a lack of energy on one or more people on your team, taking the time to ask the questions, get to know people, and start to tie these pieces together, you can start to see that things that the energy level will raise, because now I can see why this matters to me. Right. Yeah. And for some people, it's easy. They're self-motivated and it's easy for them to make a connection. For other people, it's a little more challenging. And your role is to help make sure that they move through that challenge. And then you've got everyone working in concert to make sure that your function, your department is doing its part, and everybody is bought in to what it is you're doing. And it could be for their own individual, it could be purely selfish, but they're bought in nonetheless. And that's what helps to move you to get forward as a team.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it reminded me of a long time ago. I used to have this leadership training program, and I went on a kind of a recruiting tour in my organization, and I was talking to some people, and I met this one gentleman who's actually became my mentee, and I said, so what are you hoping, what are your goals here in this organization? He goes, oh, I want to do what you do. I want your job. I said, let's make that happen. And, I wasn't, offended. I thought it was kind of funny that he was so bold. I said, well, let's make that happen for you. And he ended up being a really great candidate and doing some great things. He didn't take my job, but
you're irreplaceable. So, well, of course,
apparently I wasn't, but
they didn't replace you.
No, they did not.
See,
but it was really funny because I was like, oh, great, and that was his value. He wanted to move up. He wanted to move from the entry level position that he was in, and he wanted to go and be in management like I was. I said, oh, let's make that happen, because I saw that as ambition. I didn't see that as, oh, this kid is cocky.
It's not a threat or a threat, right? Yeah.
but I'm sure there was some cockiness there. But for me, I was able to disarm that with humor. I just laughed at it. I said, well, let's make it happen. And instead of getting all offended and defensive about it, and then later on, and this is before the program started, I checked in, and this person was doing really well, and it was a nomination type of thing, and they actually nominated him to come and be in the program, and he did very well. And so, and now he's since moved on from that organization and is a manager someplace else. So he actually was able to achieve that goal and did well, and it was his value, and he worked really hard because I put him in a position to activate that. You want my, here's what I do. You have to do this, 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 and this. And he was like, okay. And he was doing those things. And because I gave him those opportunities, and those were the opportunities he wanted, he worked really, really hard. So that's just, one example.
Oh, here's the question that I frequently get, and I'm interested in knowing sort of your take on this. That example that you gave, right, is a great example of how you can leverage someone's desires, their goals, to move them forward. But the question that I get is for people who will tell me that they've got people on their team that aren't interested in being promoted. They don't want another position. They just want to come in, do their job, and leave. And so how do I get them to buy in? How do I get them to feel motivated and energized to do work when all they want to do is come in and go?
We need those people too, right? We need the people that are really good at making widgets and stamping widgets. We need those people, but connecting it to something that matters to them. Everybody, most people, I'm going to say everybody, has something that matters to them. And we hinted at that. Is it buying a house? Is it putting your kids through school? Is it, whatever it is, this job will help you do that. You certainly can't do that if you lose this job. Right. And also giving them some parameters, some performance parameters. So, okay, well, here's where your performance is now. If you want to achieve those things, we got to get your performance up to, this level and sustain it so that you can achieve those things. Not everybody is coming into the organization. And I hate to say this, this is going to sound really weird. They're not coming into the organization to make the organization money. That's not their goal. No, they're like, I'm going to go into an organization and make them billions of dollars. They're coming into an organization because of their own personal goals. However, when they do that, there's a contract. You don't come in and just, and kick back and not work. There's okay, you want to make that happen? Sure, let's make that happen. You don't want to move up? That's fine. But there are some performance metrics that you have to hit in order to stay here and therefore reach the goals or get the things that you want out of life. So you can still do that. Not everybody is going to be motivated to help the company achieve its strategic plan. I mean, I hate to say it, but that is the truth of it. There are some people that are entirely self-serving, but are willing to do a good job in order to serve themselves, and that's fine. You just have to be able to connect that and let them know, well, this is the performance that you're going to have in order to be a productive member of this organization and a productive employee here, so that you can make those things happen for yourself. Organizations are full of those people that are just there for whatever. I used to say this back in the day when I was working and doing music. My job funds my dreams, right? I can't buy the things that I need for my dream if I'm not doing a good job. So I have to do a good job so I can stay employed. I can get that raise. I can get that promotion or whatever it is. So I can up-level the thing that I was trying to up-level outside of that job.
Absolutely.
So they work, side by side. And if you can tap into that, Dr. Phil used to say, I'm appealing to your greed. Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. And that's pretty much exactly what I tell them, right? It's like, it may not be that they're, the thing that floats them is this organization. But there's something, they're there for a reason, even if it's just to keep a roof over their head, if
Mhm.
it's to not have to move back home to mom's,
Mhm.
right? Whatever it is. And your job is to help them again make a connection to
Mhm.
that and what you're expecting of them performance wise, right? That there needs to be a connection. That the problem is the disconnect, right? And so there is no clarity of what they're doing, why they're doing it, whether it's for the organization, for themselves, or some combination, right? Some people, I was driven by just doing a good job. I wanted to be as good at my job as I could be then and now. And always sort of this competition that I had with myself, whether I was a tutor, whether I was waiting tables, working in retail, it didn't matter. I wanted to be the best I could be. And I wanted to, like in waiting tables and retail, right? It was about tips and commissions. And that was the thing. And so there's always something there. You just, if the person is not self-motivated, you have to help them figure out what that thing is for them. And they may not even know what it is, right? And I think that's the challenge for a lot of managers and leaders, is that they've got someone on the team who doesn't really know what that is, and so it's not easily forthcoming. It may take some time for you to help them draw that out, right? But eventually get get that drawn out, help make that connection, and you will see a difference in how they contribute, because it then becomes about them, right? It becomes about whatever that is for them, whether it's being the best, it's making more money, it's the house, more guitars, being able to get the black belt, whatever it is, tap into that thing. And I love that my job funds my dreams. And if nothing else, help them see that. This is the job you have. You could have there are lots of other jobs you could have, but you're here. So let's make this work for you. Let's make it work for me. And tying into that, and helping people feel like they are a part of something, and that the work that they are doing has meaning for themselves, and ultimately it has meaning for your organization, and the people that you serve make a huge difference, right? The thing that is not going to help you is low morale and that disconnection, or chastising people for not bringing a different energy and work level, a work ethic, without helping them figure out how to turn that around. Sometimes people are stuck in that because they don't know. They don't know anything else. And so this is an opportunity for you to help them with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. So we are going to wrap this up. Any final thoughts that you have? Anything you want to talk about that we didn't cover, or something you want to reiterate?
Well, maybe just this thing here, shared meaning, and when you get that happening with your team, make sure you celebrate those wins, even the small ones. Do something to commemorate the progress that the team is making, because that is helping build momentum. We sometimes confuse momentum with speed, and momentum is not about speed; it's about constant forward motion. And you do that by celebrating even the smallest step in the direction that you want to go, because that's going to help keep that fire burning with your people. So I didn't really mention that earlier, but I wanted to mention that now.
Awesome. Um, and I just want to say that your your team's energy is one of your most important leadership indicators, right? But it's not going to change unless you do something. And energy is one of our simple components, as is intentionality. And so, listening, right? Creating safety, reconnecting people to purpose. This isn't something that requires, you don't have to spend like big budgets in order to do this. You just have to be intentional, right? This is something that you get to decide. I'm going to be intentional about creating an environment that is safe for my people to explain, to contribute, to share, to ask questions, to learn, etc. I'm going to be intentional about making sure that my team members are connected to a purpose that drives them, that helps create momentum for them. And it starts with listening, right? And recognizing that what you're seeing, what you're feeling from them is just feedback. It's just feedback. It's information, it's data, and you get to take that and do something with it. So would call to action would be this week, pay attention. Just pay attention. And don't focus just on what's not getting done. Ask what's not being said, right? What's not being said? What isn't being communicated verbally, but you can see it in the energy. And if you start asking the question, being curious, then you can start to shift that energy in a way that's going to help your team be more engaged and ultimately more productive.
I
So,
totally agree. Agree.
if you want help assessing your team's energy and building habits to restore it, and you want to reach out to Robert to help you to do that, Robert, how would someone go about doing that?
They can email me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com, or they can go to my website, Robert Hilliard Coaching, fill out that contact form, let me know your challenges and your goals and the energy you have for achieving them. And we can talk about setting up that discovery call and talk about whether or not we are a good fit for each other. I love those discovery calls, so feel free to do that.
I love that. And likewise, you could reach out to me at shiftingintoaction.now.site, shiftingintoaction.now.site, and you can connect with me there. And likewise, let's talk about whether or not we are a good fit. And if it's not me, if it's not Robert, right, I've got a whole community of coaches that I'm connected to, and I'm sure we can find the right person for you. So, if you are watching this premiere or you're watching this on replay, now drop a note in the comment. Let us know, what do you do to recognize and to shift the energy with your team. Let us know what you're doing, or if you've got questions about it, drop it in the comments. We would love to answer those for you. And if you have a topic that you would like for us to cover in the future, please feel free to contact Robert or I. We would love to see how we can incorporate the topics that you're interested in into the show in the future. So we want to thank you for your energy, for being here with us today. And we look forward to continuing the conversations around energy and the other pillars of the simple leadership method. So look out for those in the future. And until next time, take care.
Bye now.